don't think that throwing money at the problem is going to solve it, whatever your issue is. I think it can be very tempting to encounter a problem and just say, okay, like, oh well, there's an expensive software solution for that. Sure, that's fine, but that has an ability to really hide the true nature of the problem. And really not expose that. Fundamentally your process might be flawed, right? And so throwing money or expensive solutions at something, or hiring a bunch of people, or resources, it's not always that. Sometimes you can do a lot more with a lot less. And actually, when you do have a lot less, it forces you to be extremely lean.
Hey everyone, this is Devin Miller here with another episode of The Inventive Journey. I'm your host, Devin Miller, the serial entrepreneur that's grown several startups and 7- and 8-figure businesses, as well as founder and CEO of Miller IP Law, where he helps startups and small businesses with their patents and trademarks. You ever need help with yours, just go to strategymeeting.com, grab some time with us to chat, and we're always here to help. Now, today we've got another great guest on the podcast, Josh Wall. And Josh started his journey, went to college and started out wanting to do or get an aviation degree, started out in that direction, switched over and went to, I think, to the EU or EU Academy, and was also dealing with some family health issues at the time. I ended up traveling over to down to South Africa to help with the family estate, and so wasn't able to finish the program, and then switched over to the dental program. But still always wanted to go into aviation, so ended up went back to pursue that further in the program in New York, and then afterwards led to him starting his business, which is what he's doing today. So with that much as a introduction, welcome on the podcast, Josh.
It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you very much for the invite, man.
Absolutely excited to have you on. So, well, I just gave a quick walkthrough to a longer journey. So why don't we rewind and unpack that a little bit and tell us a little bit about how your journey got started, going off to college and wanting to go into aviation.
Yeah, sure. No worries. I graduated from Valley Stream High School, which is in New York, Long Island, and I was an average student. I think I was bottom half of my class. And I actually failed math. I got left back in math, I think, in 7th grade. So from there on, it was just always had that stigma on me. And my parents did not appreciate that. So I'm a first-generation American. So my mother was from South Africa, and my birth father is from Barbados. So part of the British Commonwealth, they're really, really sticklers for education. So yeah, it didn't go well. I was kind of like a class clown, but anything that I wanted to do or anything that I had an interest in doing, I always went 100% at it, right? Put my passion into it. So I loved strategy. So when I did chess, I became the president of the chess club for a couple of years. Played football, did wrestling, wind ensemble, jazz band, all that stuff. But I definitely had some self-esteem issues for sure, especially with that being left back in 7th grade for math.
So you go down that route, and then you said you go off to college, and I think that with that as a background, you started to go into aviation, and I think was was drawn towards that.
Yes, yeah. So I originally go to Quincy University, which is in Illinois. I did that for 1 year as a flight operations program. Ended up having to leave there because it got a little expensive, and I just actually didn't do as much financial planning for that as I could have. So ended up coming back to New York and working as a canvasser for Greenpeace in New York City. And that was my first time really breaking out of my shell in terms of speaking to people, being forced to speak to people randomly, like a cold call type of situation. And I was able to meet a lot of people that way. And that's actually the first time that I really realized the lesson of you can't judge a book by its cover, especially for a place like New York City. I've met a lot of people who are ultra wealthy, ultra intelligent, and you would never know it because they look homeless. They actually look homeless. So that was a pretty humbling experience.
Hmm.
So then I needed to go. I mean, I always wanted to go into aviation, and I always wanted to work for KLM. So my mother, I was really privileged to travel a lot as a little kid. We were always on planes. I went everywhere from Thailand to South Africa, Namibia,
Hmm.
Germany, Netherlands, you name it. And I was always looking more forward to the plane ride than the actual flight. Or the trip itself. And so I attribute that to my mom, me wanting to be a pilot, and she loved the Netherlands. So as a result, I ended up loving the Netherlands, and I always wanted to work for KLM, which is their national airline. And the only way to do that effectively would be to move to Europe so that I could get a certification done in Europe as opposed to here in the United States.
Hmm.
So I tried to get into their academy, their KLM Flight Academy, in a place called Groningen in the Netherlands. And they never had an American even attempt to do something like that. So it was going to be a process. It was going to be really tough.
Hmm.
And I tried, couldn't do it. But my stepfather lived in the south part of the Netherlands, and the Netherlands borders Belgium. And Belgium had a flight academy, also a legacy flight academy called the Sabine Flight Academy, which is now CAE Global Aviation Academy Brussels. And it was only about like 90 minutes away from where he was staying. And my mother was staying with him. My mother ended up moving to Europe. And so I was like, okay, let me try this out. They're a global academy, so it made it a lot easier to get certification there. And it wasn't that far from my stepfather. So
Now, one
I ended up
question,
having,
and fill me in because I think you know a couple of there are parts of your journey that we chatted a bit about before. Was at one point you made kind of a departure to go to medical school, and you also had
yeah,
went to South Africa in order to.
that comes later. That comes
Oh,
later.
then I
Okay.
don't mean to interrupt your journey, and definitely go ahead.
No
So
worries, no worries, no worries,
keep walking us through it.
no worries. Uh, the training is really rigorous in Europe. The education standard is really the highest, and I just wasn't prepared for that. So I had to study a lot to get into that academy, and the selection process towards the end of it, with all the psychometric evaluations and physics and math and everything, my mother passes away in 2012. And which was kind of screwed up because she never got to see me fly. And but I was heads down. It happened during the selection process, and I spent too much time, trying to get into it. So got in, got the green light, started my training in 2013. And then from 2013 going on for 20 months, it was just rigorous training. And I ended up getting into some health issues, which led to some financial issues. Ultimately, I couldn't finish the rest of my training. I ended up getting a frozen commercial pilot license, a frozen ATPL. And then at the same time, because I'm the only child, this is where I ended up having to fly to South Africa to take care of my mother's estate. And I was supposed to be there for like 2 months, and it ended up being about a year and a half. And it was a really humbling experience because I had really no money, and you could say I was living in poverty. And I saw a lot of things, almost lost my life a few times due to gang violence, and just had a lot of things going on. I had a cousin there, Esmeralda, who really, God, if it wasn't for her, I don't know how I would have came out of that place. But learned some really life changing lessons, especially like not taking food for granted. Right? I don't waste food on my plate at all. Like there's just too many people that don't have that. Anyway, so I'm degreeless, and I can't fly anymore. So just no education, and I'm getting older. And so one of my best mates back in the US, he says, okay, well, he's an engineer. He says, okay, well, all right, let's figure this out. What can you do now? You can either, the goal here is to be self-sufficient, and, live, right? So you can either go into engineering, which I wasn't going to do at the time because I was just tapped out mentally from, my training previously, or I could do nursing. and I underestimated nursing. My mother was a nurse. I thought it would have been an easy peasy thing. I'm like, okay, well, I've done calculus, I've done advanced fluid dynamics. This would be a freaking breeze. And so I come back to the United States. I apply to a nursing school for LPN certificate. I breezed through the theory, but the practical was really intense. It changed me fundamentally. Learned a lot of things about myself and patients and patients in both ways, patients and medical patients, but also the patients of the virtue. And ultimately, that wasn't for me. But another one of my mates at the time, while I was in nursing school, got me a job as a janitor at a boutique gym that he was running in Queens, New York. So I took that job, and I took a few other janitorial jobs, and that was humbling because you go from being a hotshot pilot to cleaning piss off of toilet seats. Bless you. No worries. So just cleaning up after people's messes.
Excuse me, I had that. They always sneezes always come in too, so go right on ahead.
No worries, no worries. Yeah, so while I'm doing the custodial work, I end up taking a likeness to fitness, and I start learning about fitness, and I become a fitness trainer, personal trainer. I end up actually managing that gym later on for about 4 days before the owner of the gym decides to pull the rug from out and just call it quits, because he already invested a lot into the gym, and apparently wasn't working out the way that he wanted it to. So I no longer nursing school. I have a few clients that I have that are paying me, and that's sort of keeping the lights on. But now I'm a rebel without a cause. I sort of just aimless, and I try to start my own gym with a couple of partners, and that was kind of my first time really. It wasn't my first time trying some form of entrepreneurial venture, but in a serious sense of actually creating business plans and projections. That was my first experience with that, and that was not easy. And ultimately, we failed. We tried. We put in like 2 years, but it was a good experience. And I remember this one day, I wake up out of this dream, quite literally, like Frankenstein's monster, and I'm like, aviation maintenance. And I never even thought about that because aviation has always been my passion. You can see all the planes behind me, right? So I'm not making that up. And I immediately looked for a program. The nearest program near me is a place called Vaughan College of Aeronautics and Technology in Queens, New York. And I apply, I get in, and then I start breezing through the program. The educational experience that I had in Europe was really prepped me for that, right? I already knew a lot of the theory. It was just learning tools and how to use those that was learning the curve. And while I'm there, word starts to get around that I used to be a pilot, and obviously people can see like the stuff is easy for me. So people start asking me questions, especially for help on how to explain this. What is absolute pressure? What is absolute humidity or pressure altitude? And every time I'm in the library, I'm sitting in these round tables, and I end up starting teaching mini classes inadvertently. People just are around me and, explaining the best that I can. Just always loved teaching. And then I started realizing at that point, there's something wrong. And it wasn't the school, but it was just the overall maintenance education curriculum. At that time, I didn't know it was nationwide or systemic. I just thought it was there localized. And I end up getting into a situation where about 6 months prior to graduation, I became homeless for a while. And my partner, she's still my partner. She ends up giving me her car, at least for a couple of months, to live in, which was cool. It was the dead of winter, so it was really, really cold. So what I would do, I would just park next to the school. I didn't have a lot of money, so it was just turn the ignition on, put the heat on for like 15 minutes, then turn it off 45 minutes, and keep doing that throughout the night. Then I'd wake up at about, I guess, 6 o'clock in the morning. I took a really cheap membership out to one of these gyms. I would go there and take a shower, brush my teeth, put on my clothes for the day, and then spend all day in class, spend all afternoon and evening in the library till closing, and then I'd go to like a local diner and study for most of the night. And she needed her car back, so then I needed to figure out something else. So I ended up having to I ended up getting like this Airbnb that was about like $90 a week. And so in New York City, you can imagine if it's $90 a week, it was a very interesting experience. Got kicked out from or relocated many times because the sheriff's department would come in and saw that the conditions weren't really, cool. I'll just leave it at that. But it was close enough to the school so that I could finish. That was really my intention. And in that time, even with all that going on, that's when I had this idea for an app, right? So there's got to be a better, especially with what I saw in Europe, I was like, there's got to be a better way to teach maintenance. And I started having this idea that, all right, if I'm experiencing it here, I wonder if other people are experiencing it. And coincidentally, there's this national aviation maintenance competition for schools nationwide. And it was coming up to be around the same time that the spring semester was closing. So I told myself, okay, wow, it's called an MRO Maintenance Expo Week, but there's also a maintenance competition. And I told myself, okay, like there's going to at least be 80 or 100 schools there. So that's a way to survey a bunch of the nation at once. So I got my friend to buy a Greyhound bus ticket for me. And that was always an experience, right? No one likes to ever really take a Greyhound bus because it's always crazy it's always a crazy ride. I've never had a situation where it was an eventless time on a Greyhound. But anyway, I cut class for about four days. I go down to Atlanta. I think it was in Atlanta. And I print out a badge, like a fake badge. And I hit the floor as though I'm like a surveyor. I'm working with the place, and I'm not. And I start serving students. And funny enough, my school sent their team down. So when they saw me down there, they're like, "What the hell are you doing down here? Because you're not on the you're not on the team." So I forget what I said to them, but they were cool with it, whatever. And but the bottom line is that the data that I got from that surveying process told me that the issues that I was experiencing there were systemic and nationwide. And I was able to come back to New York now saying, okay, like if I was going to do this, I need to make sure that this is somewhat data driven. And that's when I started working like a mad scientist in the library, coming up with mock-ups. I didn't know what a Delaware C corporation was. I didn't know what equity stake was, dilution, none of that stuff. This was just all brand new. I had a mentor who was able to at least, he had his own startup. It was pretty successful that I met in school. He was also a fellow aviator. And he was able to guide me through the incorporation process. And my co-founder and I, we end up starting Amtil. And while we do that, right, now we're coming up to the pandemic. And during the pandemic, my stepfather was living in the Netherlands. So at the beginning of the year, his best and only friend dies. And then in the middle of the year, I get the call that he also passed away, dropped away from a massive heart attack. So they all died really in the same house, like just a few steps apart from each other. And obviously I have to go to the Netherlands, and travel restrictions were tight. So the Dutch government only allowed for me to travel and not my partner because she wasn't married to me. So that was a real tough experience of having to be isolated there and still try to run a company with a 6 or 7 hour time difference. And morale starts to drop. And I'll be honest with you, I think a lot of people as well, but I started drinking a lot, excessively, actually. And It was something that I was kind of doing. Apparently, it does run in my family, and it they say it takes about like 7 years to admit that you have some kind of addiction to alcohol, and it was building. And the pandemic was really where that real catalyst of just being there by myself at night, you know,
Hmm.
regret, all that stuff, right? And yeah, it was tough. I came back to the States after that, moved down to Charlotte, North Carolina, bought a home there with my partner. And that was really where I started. That's the first time that I admitted to myself that I had an issue of drinking. And that's the interesting thing about the entrepreneurial journey, especially if you're running a company where there are multiple people a part of it, is it forces you to be very honest with yourself. And I told myself that this isn't sustainable. I was starting to destroy relationships, friendships, and I told myself this can't go on. And if I've dedicated so much time to this company, and I really do want this to succeed, I got to get a handle on this. And at the same time, I also get diagnosed for severe ADHD, and so the culmination of just figuring out what I am, right, and how to cope with these things, really kind of threw my life for a frenzy. But therapy. Ended up taking medication for the addiction, injection shots. So was able to get that really squared away, improve the quality of my life, improve my thinking process. The ADHD started to become medicated for that. Learn coping techniques, and all these things started to really foster more creativity for the company. And we were able to do a lot more, especially my co-founder and myself.
Hmm.
But it was a tough time during that period, and almost gave up quite a few times. My co-founder is truly a rock star, and yeah, now we're here. Now we're getting ready for launch, for full product launch. We're traveling throughout the country, testing with students. We're coming up with our iterative process for the next version of the software, and we have quite a few awesome things that I'm not going to say because I don't want to jinx them, but quite a few awesome things that are lined up for this year. And yeah, that's kind of the nick of it.
Oh,
Entrepreneurship
that's
is a. I thought that flying, or I thought flying and the nursing thing, I thought all those things were extremely difficult, and they are, but most people aren't cut out for really what it takes to take something from a napkin sketch and sort of just bring that to fruition and into reality. It's a lot of sacrifice, for sure.
No, sounds like it. Sounds like quite the journey of weaving or through a lot of different things and coming out and figuring out how to deal with deal with them. So sounds like on a great track now and a lot of opportunity ahead. And you started to touch on it, but maybe just follow up a little bit. You said that kind of over the next period of time you're going to be releasing some features. So is that kind of the focus over the next 6 to 12 months? Is kind of bringing beta users or initial testers on, as well as rolling out those features, or kind of what do
Yeah,
you see as the next 6 to 12 months?
yeah, for sure. So we actually just broke revenue. We got our first few customers. So from what I've been told, that's a huge milestone, especially when you didn't know if this is going to work out almost 5 years ago. And so yeah, it's going to be just rolling out various modules within inside of our training platform, which is dedicated for aviation maintenance training. And then setting up some partnerships, some key strategic partnerships, and just really continuing to test and continuing to just develop the product. We launched our go-to-market strategy about a month ago, so we've been pretty all hands on deck, and it's exciting. It's really exciting, especially now where the importance of aviation maintenance and maintenance training is really at the fore of the general public because of what's been happening, right? Door plugs falling out and wheels falling off of aircraft, etc. So it's actually it's actually an ideal time for I wouldn't want to say that things happen for a reason. I'm not sure if I believe in that, but
No,
it is just
you're not hoping that the wheels fall off, but at
no,
least you
for
have.
sure not, for sure not, for sure
But
not.
no, you have something in place to or make sure to avoid that in the future and to
Yeah,
provide that proper training, which is awesome.
for
So,
sure.
well, now as we've kind of caught up to the present day of the journey and even looking a bit into where things are headed, always a great time to transition to the two questions I like to ask towards the end of each episode. So the first question I'd like to ask is, along your journey, what was the worst business decision you ever made? What did you learn from it?
So I would say the worst decision was to not keep the product at the focus.
Hmm.
Not keep the product centered in the vision. I think in the beginning, and this is novice, it's a rookie mistake for sure. But I allowed myself to be very distracted with the fundraising process, with building a team, with trying to get press, with you know unimportant meetings, you name it. And I lost sight, especially as CEO of it, right? I lost sight of the product.
Hmm.
And without a product, you have no progress. And that's exactly what happened. Actually, we weren't able to make progress. We stalled. High levels of frustration. Lost a lot of money. Well, I want to say lost because I mean, we'll see in a few years if that remains true. But you know what I mean. So
Yeah.
I would say that what I learned is that was my major mistake, and what I learned is definitely to at keep the product at the center, and then everything else will follow. Two of my advisors, Diana Santiago and Dan Weber, they were telling me this at the very beginning, and I was just very arrogant. I was very stubborn. But they were saying like, yeah, just focus on the product. Like things will come, and surely, slowly but surely, they have as we focus and full focus completely on the product. So that's what I've learned, and that's my yeah.
No, I think that's a great, and you always kind of say, "Oh, I'll be the exception, the rule, and I won't make the mistakes everybody else
Nah,
makes." But
nah,
that's always an easy one to make. You have a lot of things, and a lot of times as an entrepreneur, as a business owner, saying, "Hey, I'm keeping busy. It means I've got to be making progress," and that can be true. And it doesn't mean that you shouldn't keep busy. By all means, you're going to be plenty busy, but
right.
busy doesn't always equate to being productive or focusing on the things that will be the most impactful for the business. So definitely, an easy mistake to make, but a great one to learn from.
For sure, for sure.
Second question now that I'd like to ask is, so now if you're talking to somebody that's just getting into a startup or a small business, what would be the one piece of advice you give them?
I would say I would say don't think that don't think that don't think that throwing money at the problem is going to solve it, whatever your issue is. Uh, I think it can be very tempting to encounter a problem and just say, okay, like, oh well, there's an expensive software solution for that. Sure, that's fine, but that that has an ability to really hide the true nature of the problem, and really not expose that. Fundamentally, your process might be flawed, right? And so throwing money or expensive solutions at something, or hiring a bunch of people, or um, you know resources, they're not always it's not always that. Sometimes you can do a lot more with a lot less, and actually when you do have a lot less, it forces you to be extremely lean, and in that mode, that's where anecdotally that's where I've been the most creative. That's where we as a team have been the most creative, running lean. So don't get caught in that trap of thinking that you just need to build a bigger team, or you just need to throw more money at something. Try to fundamentally see what the actual issue is. That's what I would say.
No, I like that. And, I think that sometimes, is backwards as initially sounds is what you hit on. Sometimes the more money in a business early, especially early on, can be a curse in the sense that now you're almost looking for a reason to spend, or you're spending on things that aren't going to be or have a good return, or you're staffing up, or you're doing advertising, or getting a new office, and all those things are fun and make you feel successful, but they don't necessarily build a business. So I think that's definitely a great one to hit on. So well, now as we do wrap up the episode, if people want to reach out to you, they want to be a customer, they want to be a client, they want to be an employee, they want to be an investor, they want to be your next best friend, any or all of the above, what's the best way to reach out to you, contact you, find out more?
Sure. So you can contact me via LinkedIn. So you can type in Josh K. N. Wall, Antil, which is Alpha Mike Tango India Lima. Or you can go to our website at antil.co. And yeah, that, or my personal email address, if you want to shout out to me personally, would be josh.wall at antil.co. And that's a great way. Appreciate it.
Awesome. Well, I definitely encourage people to reach out, support a great business, make a new connection. If nothing else, make a new best friend. So, but with that, thank you again, Josh, for coming on the podcast. It's been fun. It's been a pleasure. Now, for all of you other listeners that are out there, if you have your own journey to share and you'd like to be guests on the podcast, we'd love to have you. So just go to inventiveguest.com, apply to be on the show. Also, if you are to help us reach even more startups and small businesses to help them along their journey to success, just go to strategymeeting.com, grab some time with us to chat. We're always here to help. Also, make sure to click share, subscribe, leave us a review. Also helps us to reach even more startups and small businesses. So with that, thank you again, Josh, for coming on the podcast, and wish the next leg of your journey even better than the last.
Thanks so much. Cheers.